Introducing Kinna Kafches, Rabbi Jonathan Taub.
It's often hard to relate to the Kinnas. The language is difficult. It's full of allusions. But I think this year, and we're about to read Kinna Kafches, so many of the phrases of this Kinna have they definitely resonate. Dirossi Chareva, my dwelling is in ruins. So many people have lost their homes, their businesses, their agriculture. Ve'edri Nishba, my flock is captured. We've had some tragedies of capture the last few weeks. The enemy comes up misubchoy, from his dense brush, Horag Hamoinim, Zinvom Kichvi, he attacked from behind like a snake. Aifa Nafshi Lohorgim, my spirit is exhausted by the killers. Lemispa Harugim, by the number of the murder victims. He carries on and on. Anybody who actually reads Kinna Kafches, if you have the English, have a look. So many of the phrases. We are at war. For some reason they call it mivtza. I don't know why it's called a mivtza. It seems a milchama to me. And the question is, what are we meant to learn being at war? How does it relate to Tishah B'Av? Rabbi Gottlieb mentioned one of the greatest tragedies to happen on Tishah B'Av, and it's one of the 5 tragedies mentioned in the Mishnah in Tainis, is the fall of Beitar. The fall of Beitar was a tragedy. It has to be one of the greatest tragedies in Jewish history. There are accounts of it both in Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that Romans killed so many Jews that their horses were up to their noses in Jewish blood. There were 2 rivers. Each river was 2 parts water to 1 part blood. A third was blood. 7 years, the non-Jews fertilized their vineyards with Jewish blood. One estimate of the number of Jews killed is over 2 million. What led to it? And we have to ask ourselves, what led to it? What can we learn from it to make sure it doesn't happen again? The famous philosopher George Santayana said, the one who does not remember history is bound to live through it again. What can we learn from Beitar? The leader of the revolt in Beitar, it's known as the Bar Kokhba revolt. His name was actually Bar Koziva, and Rabbi Akiva thought that he had the potential to be Mashiach, and therefore called him Bar Kokhba, thought he was a real star. And he was the one who was holding out against the Romans, and he had an army. And he had an army of 200,000. To get into his army, you had to cut off one of your fingers. That showed you were tough. And he had 200,000 people who'd done this. And the rabbi said to him, how long will you carry on making the Jewish nation blemished? And he said, well, I want to make sure that I have tough soldiers. So they said to him, we'll give you another test. Somebody who's applying to your army has to gallop on a horse, gallop past a cedar tree, a cedar of Lebanon, grab hold of the tree. What will normally happen? The horse will gallop on and the soldier will stay with the tree. But no, to get into your army, you have to gallop on the horse, grab hold of the tree, the cedar tree, and take it with him. If you do that, you get into the army. Talmud Yerushalmi recounts that another 200,000 people passed the second test. So he had an army of 400,000 really tough men. And when he went out to fight the Romans, he would turn to God and say, Master of the world, don't help. We don't need you to help. Just don't ruin it. That was his tefillah. And the Romans besieged Beitar for 3.5 years, and they couldn't take it. Why? Why? I'll tell you why. Because in Beitar, there was an old man who happened to be Bar Kokhba's uncle. And his name was Rabbi Modoi. And he was fasting, and he was with sackcloth and ashes. And every day he would pray a slightly different prayer. And his prayer would be, Master of the world, Al teishev b'din hayom, Al teishev b'din hayom. Please don't sit in judgment today. And after 3.5 years, Hadrian is about to give up and leave. And a Kuttite comes over and says, don't leave, give me a chance, I can get them for you. And it's somewhat chilling to read this, but he gets into Beitar through a tunnel. He gets into Beitar through a tunnel and goes straight to Rabbi Modoi. And Rabbi Modoi is davening. And when he's davening, he's oblivious to everything that's going on. And the Kuttite makes out as though he's whispering in his ear. And people in Beitar see, there's a stranger, what's going on here? And they take him to Bar Kokhba. And Bar Kokhba says to him, what were you saying to Rabbi Modoi? What was he saying to you? He says, if I tell you, the emperor's going to kill me. And if I don't tell you, you're going to kill me. I'm going to tell you. He was telling me that he can get Beitar to come over to the Romans. Bar Kokhba goes over to Rabbi Modoi and says, what was he saying to you? What was he saying to you? And Rabbi Modoi says, nothing. What were you saying to him? Nothing. And Bar Kokhba doesn't believe him. And Bar Kokhba gives him a kick. Can you imagine a Bar Kokhba judo kick? And Rabbi Modoi is an old man, and he's weak after 3.5 years of fasting. And he's killed. He dies on the spot. And a heavenly voice comes out and says, you have killed Rabbi Modoi. You have killed, yeah, the strong arm of Israel. You have blinded the right eye. Your arm will be killed. Your eye will be blinded. Next words of the Gemara, just the next words, that's all it says. Next words, immediately, Beitar was captured and Bar Kokhba was killed. And then the Talmud goes into a description of the carnage. What are we meant to learn from the story? Firstly, his real name is Bar Kokhba. The word kazav, sheker v'chazav, it's falsehood. His whole approach of, we can do it on our own, that's false. You've got it wrong. He has an army of 200,000. What's the test to get into his army? You have to cut off a finger. The idea, the symbolism that Chazal are telling us is that these soldiers do not have a correct grasp of the situation. They do not have a correct grasp of the situation. Chazal give an alternative test. When you are riding on your horse, and that is the symbol in those days of going out to battle, sus v'roich v'rama v'yam, the tank of those days. When you are riding on your horse, when you are in battle, you do have a grasp. You grasp onto the Erez Balvanoin. And what is the Erez Balvanoin? Tzadik. Katama Yifrach. Ke'erez Balvanon Yizke. You grab onto the tzaddik and you realize that's what I'm taking with me into battle. That's the correct grasp. Rabbi Elazar, if you look at his name, Elazar, God helps. We need his help. Mudoi, he's aware. He understands. The Korban HaEdah, the main commentary on the Yerushalmi, says that when the Bas Kol proclaims, you have killed the strong arm of Israel, Zroan shel kol Yisrael, she'asam amidon b'tfilasai. The arm is the tefillah. And what's the eye? Ve'ein yaminom ki ba'or toroso hoyu roim or. Rabbi Elazar provides two weapons. He provides tefillah and he provides Torah. And it's not the 400,000 soldiers. When Rabbi Elazar is killed, they're still there. But without him, they fail. I was teaching a group of students from abroad last week, and one of them, the daughter of a Rav that I know in England, Diane Binstock, she showed me an email that her father had received from a young lady who he knows, talking about her brother who serves in Nachal 931. There are 10 young men in that regiment, and one of them, Yossi, went to the Sadigo Rebbe before he went out to fight to ask for a bracha. And the Sadigo Rebbe gave him a Noam Elimelech, Sefer Noam Elimelech, small Noam Elimelech. He said, take this with you. In Gaza, he was shot. The bullet went through the left side of his chest, hit the Noam Elimelech, was deflected, just missing his heart, went through and out the back, missing his spine by millimeters. He was taking the Erez Balvanon with him into Milchama. You know what the most scary part of the story of Beitar is? The part that terrifies me? That the enemy understood it better than our leaders. The Kuti understands I'm going straight to Rabbi Elazar Modoi. Bar Kochba doesn't get it. You know what I find scary today? More than the tunnels and the rockets, I find it scary that the Hamas understands that Hashem is protecting us and our leaders don't. Maybe you're aware, the Hamas, yes, a number of their leaders have been interviewed. How come your missiles have not been very successful? Their God is protecting them. He's changing their path. We know what we're firing on target. They understand it. That's scary. You know, we understand, you know, we've had all kinds of operations. We've had something called Chomat Magen. We understand that the only Magen is the Rabbanu Shalom, and it's Torah and Tefillah. And when do we acknowledge that Hashem is our shield? Interesting. when we start our tefillah, when we start our Shemona Esrei, first bracha, Melech, Oizeh, Moshiach, U'Magen, Baruch Atah Hashem, Magen. And when we start Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos, and the Gabbai calls up the first person, V'yaza, V'yagen, V'yoshia. It's Torah, it's tefillah. Anybody who thinks it's the 400,000, oh my gosh, that's getting it wrong. We have to understand that, and I read a beautiful article by Elias Stromberg, this battle it's not just a physical battle, it's being fought on a spiritual plane. All our battles of the Jewish nation are fought on a spiritual plane, and that's why we can make a difference. The first battle that the Jewish nation fights as a nation after Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yam Suf, is the battle against Amalek. Yoshua takes an army out to fight Amalek. But the pasuk is absolutely clear. Vayakasher Yorim Moshe Yodo Yigba Yisrael V'kasher Yoniach Yodo V'gava Amalek. Has nothing to do with the army. Yes, you need an army. And there has to be Hishtadlus. But we're being told it had nothing. Moses' hands are up, we win. Moses' hands are down, we lose. And Chazal ask in the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, wait a second, Moses' hands up, we win. Moses' hands down, we lose. V'chi yodav shel Moshe oisos milchama, o shoivros milchama. Literally, do Moses' hands make or break it? And Chazal answer. It teaches us, Kol zman shal Yisrael mistaklin klapei mala, u'meshavdin es liben lavir shebashamayim hayu miskabrin v'im lav hayu noflin. By the way, you see again, Yodov shel Moshe and mistaklin. We have this dichotomy of Torah Tefillah. That is the battle plane of the war against Amalek, and really it's the battle plane of all our wars. But I want to focus in on one other aspect of the war against Amalek, which I think is so important. Moses' hands are heavy. He can't keep them up. So what happens? Vayikhu even, vayasimu tachto, vayeshiv aleo. They take a stone, and Moshe sits down, and they support his hands. Chazal, in the Gemara in Tainis, asked the question. They couldn't find a pillow? They couldn't find a cushion? He had to sit on a stone? And the answer is that Moshe said, Kivin she'Yisrael shruyim b'tzah, af ani eye imoya b'tzah. If there are Jews who are suffering, I'm going to suffer with them. The last few weeks, there has been a lot of suffering. We have wonderful young men who are going out, literally, Moser Nefesh. They are suffering, their parents are suffering. There are a whole load of people, not far from Gaza, who have to stay within 100 meters of the air raid shelter. There's a lot of suffering. And to a great extent, here in Jerusalem, it's quite easy to go about your daily life and be totally unaware of what's going on. That can't be the approach. The approach has to be the approach of Moshe Rabbeinu. If there are people suffering, I'm going to be suffering with them. There has to be an achdus in Klal Yisrael. And, each person has to decide, what's appropriate for me to do. I'll give you, I was discussing this with some students of mine. Maybe, we don't, until war is over until each person has to decide what is over. Maybe I don't have ice cream except on Shabbos. Maybe I don't listen to music. Each person can... something to show that I am mishtatef b'tzar. Something. I don't just carry on like normal. We're together. I feel. The Gemaras in Gittin, when they're talking about the destruction of Yerushalayim and Beitar, talk about the destruction of one other major settlement. And that settlement was Tur Malka. Tur Malka, huge number of Jews lived there. The Romans were besieging it, and they were being defeated by the Jews. A miracle was performed for the Romans, and the Romans say, since their God has done a miracle for us, we leave. And the Jews start rejoicing, lighting fires, and the Roman emperor looks back and says, they're laughing at us. And he goes back. And the Gemara says there were 300,000 sword-bearing soldiers that entered Tur Malka, and they killed 3 days and 3 nights. And then, in the most chilling line, the Gemara finishes, on the other side of the mountain, they're still rejoicing. Unaware of what's happening. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to suggest that because they were unaware, and because there was that disconnect, that's why the tragedy could happen. I think we, even though we're in Jerusalem, and it is so easy to be distant, I think it is incumbent upon each and every one of us to be more aware and feel. I'll give you a couple of examples of what can be done. We do not live far from Har Herzl. We do not live far from Har Herzl. You know, I think if we went to one Levaya on Har Herzl and saw the pain, our tefillahs would be different. One. I know I went to Max Steinberg's Levaya. 30,000 Jews turned up to pay their respects, and he probably didn't know a fraction of 1% of them. And when you see the pain, and when you see the achdus, and when it is a totally different experience davening after that. I know somebody, you know, we have Zeicher L'Churban, we have on our walls Amma al Amma, about 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, unpainted. Because when there's no Beis HaMikdash, our homes cannot be complete. I know somebody who, in one of the rooms in his house, taped with white tape a square 60 by 60 on the floor. On the floor. Why? Wants to have a little bit of feeling of the pachad of what might come through the floor. Every time he goes into that room, he sees the square. That is trying to feel what our brothers and sisters are feeling. I have to share with you, if we're talking about tunnels, one of the Pirkei Tehillim that now has a totally different meaning for me, it's perhaps the parak that we say most often, but Be'ez Tzora, it's the parak that speaks about Shmira. Eso einai helehorim, Rabbeinu B'chayin Karakemach says that if you look at that parak, it says Shmira 6 times. Hashem Shomrecha. Why 6 times? 4 directions, from on top and from down below. Wow. From down below. Yeah, I need Shmira from down below. friend of mine, Jonathan Kaur, showed me a Gemara. Terrifying, terrifying Gemara. It's actually a Gemara in one of the chapters we're allowed to learn, Eile Megalchin, Moed Cotton, Daf Chafei. And there, the Gemara is saying what happened when various sages died. When this sage died, there were huge balls of fire that fell down. When Rav Asi died, there was a storm and all the trees were uprooted. Are you ready for the next one? When Rav Elyashiv died, and it's the only time Rav Elyashiv is mentioned in Shas. When Rav Elyashiv died, 70 tunnels were dug in Nardo. Chafei Amud Beis near the bottom. When Rav Elyashiv died, 70 tunnels were dug in Nardo. Evil people could get through. And Rashi says, and in his lifetime, his merit made sure it didn't happen. Terrifying. Erez Balvonoi. 2 days ago, one of the great tzaddikim of Yerushalayim passed away. A man about whom Rav Elyashiv is reported to have said, and my son checked the story with somebody who would know, a man about whom Rav Elyashiv is reported to have said when he left the room, Rav Elyashiv said, there goes a Lamed Vovnik. There goes one of the 36 tzaddikim that keep the world going. Rav Yisrael Bondheim, Zeichet Tzaddik V'Kodesh Livracha. Rav Bondheim, just so you have some idea, was once on a bus when a bomb blew up on that bus. Since then he had iron pieces in his back and hearing and, carrying him, he was wounded lying there in his blood. And when they find him, he's already with his pocket Mishnayos, learning Mishnayos, lying there in the blood. And I thought to myself 2 days ago, we can't afford to lose a man like that now. That's what I thought 2 days ago. Yesterday, there were 2 piguim in Yerushalayim. Again, I can't say cause and effect, and I'm just giving you a hargosha that I had. Hargosha that I had. On Tisha B'Av, we understand that everything is a spiritual dimension. It's a spiritual dimension. It's our tshuva, it's our Torah, it's our tefillah. That is what's going to bring the geula. It is not how strong your army it is. It's not what kind of weapons you have. I am sure that I'm not the only person to have had the following feeling. You know, when Naphtali and Gilad and Ayal were kidnapped, we know in retrospect that they were killed probably minutes after they were kidnapped, within the first half hour. And we were davening with an achdus and a kavana for 3 weeks. And somehow I thought, well, you know, actually, in retrospect, what was it all for? Let me tell you, the Nissim, and anybody who doesn't see those Nissim is blind. The Nissim of the last 3 weeks, we've been drawing, on the Tefillah account. In those 3 weeks, we made a lot of deposits. And we, in the last 3 weeks, have been drawing on that account. I do believe that here in Eretz Yisrael we have been zocher to see, in the tragedy, we've been zocher to see tremendous hashgacha pratis, tremendous nisim. I am sure that not only are there mothers and fathers who are davening down here, but we have our mothers and fathers, avos, imos, that are davening for us in Shemaim as well. There are 2 phrases that have been used non-stop. If you hear people talking about this mivtzah, One phrase is Tzuk Eitan. Chazal tell us, who is Eitan? Who is Eitan? Eitan, Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Yerech Eisonim, Avram Eisoni. Eison is the word used to describe the Avos. The real Tzuk Eitan is the fact that we have Avos who are looking down at us, their beloved children, and davening for us. It's not just our tefillahs, but they daven with us. And the other phrase that has been used non-stop is Kippat Barzel. The Arizal, this is your site 3 days ago, the Arizal points out in a number of places in his writings that the imos of the Shvatim, Bila, Rochel, Zilpah, and Leah are Barzel. The real Kippat Barzel is the imos who are looking down and davening for us. Rochel Mavaka Habaneo. Hashem Yazor, if we understand that it's the spiritual plane, it's our Torah, it's our Tefillah, it's Avos, that's where the battle has to be won, then in that merit, we will see the time when Lo Yisagoel Goy Cherev, V'lo Yilmudu Oid Milchama, Babias Goel Tzedek Bimhei Rav Yameinu.